At 75, both men and women fall off a cliff.
At 75.
At the population level, it's unmistakable what happens at the age of 75. That's what we're up against. That's what I'm thinking about in the practice, is how do I create an escape velocity that gets somebody another 15 years there?
There is something deeply uncomfortable that happens when you spend enough time working in medicine. You stop seeing disease the way most people see it. You stop seeing it as bad luck. You stop seeing it as something that just happens to people. You start seeing it for what it really is. A slow, quiet accumulation of choices. Made daily. Made over years. Made without anyone realizing the damage being done until the damage is already done. I have stood at bedsides and watched people receive diagnoses that shattered their world in seconds. But here is the truth that never makes it into that conversation. That moment did not begin in that room. It began years earlier. Decades earlier. In grocery stores. In kitchens. In the decision to sit instead of move. In the slow, invisible drift away from the way human beings were built to live. That is not blame. That is biology. And biology does not care about your intentions. Here is what nobody tells you when you walk out of a doctor's office with a prescription in your hand. That piece of paper is not a solution. It is a response. It is the medical system catching up to what your body has been quietly telling you for years. The medication manages. It controls. It compensates. But it does not reverse the drift. It does not undo the years. It does not restore what was lost. And yet we have built an entire culture around the idea that the pill is the answer. We wait. We worsen. We medicate. And we call that healthcare. Walk into any pharmacy and look around. Really look. The shelves are stacked floor to ceiling with products for blood pressure, for blood sugar, for cholesterol, for inflammation, for sleep, for anxiety, for pain. And the people filling those prescriptions are getting younger. Not older. Younger. People in their 30s and 40s managing conditions that used to belong to a different generation entirely. That shift did not happen because human genetics changed. Genetics do not move that fast. That shift happened because lifestyles changed. Radically. Quietly. And almost completely. The body keeps an honest record of everything. Every meal. Every night of broken sleep. Every year of chronic stress left unaddressed. Every decade of movement replaced by stillness. It records all of it. And eventually, it hands you the bill. But here is the part that changes everything. The same system that drifts toward disease in one direction can be turned, slowly and powerfully, in the other direction. Not with anything dramatic. Not with expensive treatments or complicated protocols. With habits. Consistent, daily, unglamorous habits that your great-grandparents practiced without ever calling them habits because to them it was simply called living. Hi viewers, I want to ask you something simple and honest. When was the last time you went a full week without taking any kind of medication, whether it was a painkiller, a sleep aid, an antacid, or anything else? Drop your answer in the comments. Yes or no? I genuinely want to know. Because the answer to that question tells you more about the direction your health is heading than almost any test your doctor could run. We are the most medically advanced civilization in human history. We have machines that can see inside the body without making a single cut. We have medications that can hold chronic disease at bay for decades. We have surgical techniques so precise they border on the extraordinary. And yet despite all of that, despite every breakthrough and every innovation, the average person today is not healthier than they were 50 years ago. They are sicker. They are more medicated. They are more fatigued. They are carrying more disease in their bodies for more years of their lives than any previous generation. Lifespan has gone up. That part is true. But health span, the number of years you spend actually feeling well, actually functioning, actually living without daily dependence on medication or management, that has gone in the opposite direction. We are living longer inside broken bodies. And we have been so distracted by the miracle of surviving longer that we forgot to ask whether we were actually living better. This is not a video about abandoning medicine. Medicine saves lives. I have seen it save lives in ways that still stop me in my tracks. This is about something different. This is about the habits that medicine was never designed to replace. The foundational decisions that determine whether you arrive at old age strong and capable or arrive there depleted and dependent. The things that no prescription was ever meant to substitute for, but quietly has, because we stopped doing them. 7 habits. That is all this comes down to. 7 decisions, made consistently, that research shows can protect you from the majority of the chronic diseases filling our hospitals today. And I will tell you right now that the final 2 on this list are the ones I consider the most powerful pieces of health advice I have ever come across. The kind of advice that once it settles in your mind, quietly changes the way you see everything else. So stay with me. Because what comes next is not what you will hear in a standard clinic appointment. It is not what gets printed on a prescription. But it may be the most important thing you hear this year. The first habit is the one that sits beneath everything else. It is the foundation that every other habit either builds on or collapses without. And yet it is the one that modern food culture has done the most extraordinary job of complicating. Because it was never complicated. It was never supposed to be complicated. But somewhere between the rise of the food industry and the collapse of the family kitchen, we lost the plot.
A diet, which means a diet high in ultra-processed food, has overtaken tobacco as the leading cause of early death on planet Earth. For humans, for the animals we farm, and for wild animals, of course, because ultra-processed food is produced by a food system that is the leading cause of loss of biodiversity, the second leading cause of carbon emissions, and the leading cause of plastic pollution.
Treat your food as medicine. Not as entertainment. Not as comfort. Not as a reward at the end of a hard day. As medicine. As the most direct and powerful input your body receives every single day of your life. Think about what food actually is for a moment. Not what the packaging tells you it is. What it actually is. It is the raw material from which your body builds every cell, every hormone, every neurotransmitter, every strand of tissue that keeps you alive and functioning. Your heart muscle. Your brain. Your immune system. Your skin. Every single piece of you is assembled from what you put in your mouth. That is not a metaphor. That is molecular biology. So when you eat something, you are not just filling a gap in your stomach. You are issuing building instructions to your body. And the question worth sitting with is this. What exactly are you telling your body to build itself from? Because here is what the research shows, and this evidence is now so consistent and so large that it is genuinely difficult to argue against. People who eat in a whole food pattern, real vegetables, fruit, legumes, whole grains, healthy fats, quality protein, have dramatically lower rates of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, certain cancers, cognitive decline, and inflammatory conditions than people who rely heavily on ultra-processed food. Not marginally lower. Dramatically lower. The kind of difference that would make headlines if it were a new drug. But it is not a drug. So it does not make headlines. The food corporations understood something very early. They understood that if they could convince you your diet was missing something, they could sell you the thing they claimed was missing. So they created products fortified with nutrients that were only deficient because their other products had stripped them out in the first place. They engineered flavors so precise that your brain's reward system responds to them the way it was never designed to respond to food. They hired scientists not to make food healthier but to find what they internally called the bliss point. The precise combination of salt, sugar, and fat that makes it nearly impossible to stop eating. This was not accidental. This was a business strategy. And it worked. It worked so well that today the majority of calories consumed in many developed countries come not from anything your great-grandmother would recognize as food but from products manufactured in facilities using ingredients that did not exist 100 years ago. And the chronic disease rates have followed that shift with devastating precision. The solution is not a detox program. It is not a supplement stack. It is not cutting out one specific ingredient while continuing to eat everything else from a packet. The solution is the one that has always been there, sitting in the fresh produce section of every supermarket that has ever existed. Colorful vegetables, fruit, legumes, whole grains, olive oil, nuts and seeds, fish, quality meat in reasonable amounts, foods that came from the ground or from an animal, foods with one ingredient, foods your body recognizes because it has been processing foods like these for hundreds of thousands of years. The Mediterranean diet is the most studied dietary pattern in human history. Study after study after study shows that people who follow it have longer lives, sharper minds, healthier hearts, and lower rates of nearly every chronic condition we spend billions trying to treat. It is not exotic. It is not expensive. It is simply real food, eaten consistently, over a lifetime. One dietary change. Sustained over years. More protective than most first-line medications for the conditions killing people today. Let that settle. And if your food has been the problem, then your food can also be the beginning of the answer. The body responds. It always responds. Give it better raw material and it will build something better from it. That is not optimism. That is physiology. But even the cleanest diet cannot compensate for what the second habit addresses. Because there is a kind of stress that modern life has quietly eliminated from our days. And its absence is making us weaker, slower, and psychologically fragile in ways most people never connect back to its loss. The second habit is to deliberately do hard things. Regularly. On purpose. Not because suffering is noble. Not because discomfort is a virtue in itself. But because the human body and the human mind were both built in environments that demanded constant physical and cognitive challenge. And when that challenge disappears, something fundamental starts to deteriorate. Slowly. Quietly. Without any obvious warning sign until the deterioration has gone far enough to become a problem. Modern life is the most friction-free environment in human history. That sounds like progress. In many ways it is. But it has a cost that we are only now beginning to fully measure. There is a category of stress in research called eustress. Positive stress. The kind generated by physical effort, by learning something difficult, by pushing through something uncomfortable. And the science around it is remarkable. When you do something physically hard, when you sprint until your lungs burn or lift until your muscles fail or hold a plank 30 seconds longer than you thought you could, your body releases a cascade of compounds that are almost impossible to replicate any other way. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is essentially a growth hormone for the brain, surges. Glucose metabolism improves. Cardiovascular efficiency increases. Inflammatory markers drop. Your body was not designed to be comfortable all the time. It was designed to be challenged. And it rewards challenge with adaptation. Every single time. The psychological dimension of this is just as important. Every hard thing you finish quietly teaches your brain something. It teaches it that the discomfort was survivable. That you were capable of more than you thought before you started. And that teaching compounds. The person who consistently does hard things, who wakes up and exercises when they do not feel like it, who has the conversation they have been avoiding, who learns the skill that frustrates them, that person builds a relationship with challenge that fundamentally changes how they move through the world. They age differently. Not just physically. Psychologically. They hold on to their independence longer. They recover from setbacks faster. They report higher levels of satisfaction with their lives, not because their lives are easier, but because they have built the internal capacity to handle difficulty without being derailed by it. I want you to think about one hard thing you have been avoiding. Not something impossible. Something just outside your comfort zone. A workout you keep postponing. A morning walk you keep skipping because the weather is not perfect. A skill you told yourself you would learn but have not started. That thing. Whatever just appeared in your mind. That is the exact thing your body and brain are waiting for you to begin. Start it this week. Not next month. Not when the conditions are better. This week. Because the easy path always feels like the right path in the short term. But the body you want at 60, at 70, at 80, that body is being built or neglected right now. In the decisions you make today. In whether you choose comfort or whether you choose challenge. But there is something else quietly dismantling your capacity to make any of these good decisions consistently. Something so normalized that most people never even identify it as a threat. And it is likely the reason you have started more healthy habits than you have ever finished. Your attention is being taken from you. Not metaphorically. Literally. The devices in your pocket and on your desk were designed by some of the most talented engineers and behavioral psychologists on the planet with one primary commercial goal. To capture your attention and hold it for as long as possible. Because your attention is the product being sold to advertisers. Every notification, every algorithmically selected video, every infinite scroll was engineered to trigger a dopamine response just large enough to keep you from putting the phone down. And the neurological cost of that is something we are only beginning to understand fully. Constantly switching between stimuli, between apps, between short videos, between notifications, actually rewires the brain's reward circuitry over time. It raises the baseline level of stimulation the brain expects before it will focus. Which means that anything requiring sustained attention, a book, a workout, cooking a proper meal, a meaningful conversation, begins to feel effortful in a way it never used to. Not because those things have changed. Because the brain's threshold has shifted. Attention spans in the general population have measurably declined. And the consequences for health are direct. Not abstract. Direct. The person who cannot sustain focus is the person who starts an exercise habit and abandons it within 2 weeks because something more stimulating pulled their attention away. The person who orders fast food because they were on their phone and saw an advertisement before they got around to cooking. The person who lies awake at midnight unable to sleep because their nervous system is still buzzing from 2 hours of screen stimulation that told their brain it was still daytime. Distraction and a healthy life are increasingly incompatible. Protecting your attention is a health decision. Treat it like one. Set physical limits on screen time. Remove social media applications from your phone's home screen. Designate periods of the day where the phone is in another room entirely. Build windows of what researchers call deep focus into your daily routine. Not because productivity is the goal, but because a mind that can focus is a mind that can follow through. And following through is what separates the person who knows what they should be doing from the person who is actually doing it. And while your attention is being reclaimed, your body also needs something that most people only think about after it is already too late. Mobility. Not just exercise. Mobility. The ability to move your joints through their full range of motion, to lower yourself to the floor and rise without assistance, to carry weight, to walk for extended periods without pain, to rotate and bend and reach without restriction. These are not athletic achievements. These are the basic physical requirements of an independent life. And they are slipping away from people decades earlier than they should be. I see patients in their early 50s who move like people in their late 70s. Stiff hips. Tight hamstrings. Shoulders that cannot reach above their heads without discomfort. Knees that ache on stairs. And almost without exception, when I ask them how long they have been sedentary, the answer is years. Sometimes decades. The body adapts to whatever you ask of it. Ask it to sit still for 10 hours a day and it will adapt to that. It will shorten the muscles that are never lengthened. It will reduce the synovial fluid in joints that are never moved through their full range. It will begin the slow process of atrophy in muscles that are never loaded. And all of that happens silently, incrementally, over years, until one morning you bend down to pick something up and something that was never supposed to hurt, hurts. Here is the counterintuitive truth about joint pain that most people never hear. Most joint pain is not mechanical. It is inflammatory. The cartilage is not grinding away from overuse. The joints are being attacked by the same low-grade systemic inflammation that drives heart disease and metabolic dysfunction. And regular movement, consistent daily movement, is one of the most powerful anti-inflammatory interventions that exists. Studies consistently show that people with chronic joint pain who begin structured exercise programs report significant reductions in pain levels. Not because the exercise fixes the joint structurally, because it lowers the inflammation that was causing the pain in the first place. Movement is not what wears the body down. Stillness is. So move every day. Not perfectly. Not for hours. But intentionally. Stretch after exercise. Spend time in positions that challenge your range of motion. Build muscle through resistance training because muscle is the tissue that protects your joints, stabilizes your skeleton, and burns glucose at rest. The research on muscle mass and longevity is among the most consistent in all of medicine. The more functional muscle you carry into older age, the longer and better you tend to live. Your mobility today is a direct investment in your independence tomorrow. Do not wait until the stiffness becomes pain and the pain becomes limitation and the limitation becomes the reason you stop moving entirely. That sequence is not inevitable. But it is extremely common. And it begins long before anyone notices it happening. Now we arrive at the habit that the Harvard researchers who spent 80 years studying adult lives identified as the single greatest predictor of a long and healthy life. More predictive than cholesterol levels. More predictive than genetics. More predictive than income or exercise habits or almost anything else they measured across 8 decades of data. The quality of your close relationships. Not the quantity. The quality. This is the habit most people underestimate completely. Because it does not feel like a health intervention. It feels like a social preference. And so it gets treated as optional. As something to prioritize when life is less busy. As something to get to eventually. But the biology of loneliness is not waiting for you to get around to it. When you are chronically isolated, when you go through weeks or months without genuine connection with people who know you and care about you, your brain does not register that as solitude. It registers it as threat. As danger. Your nervous system responds to chronic isolation the way it responds to a predator in your environment. It raises cortisol. It elevates your baseline inflammatory state. It keeps your cardiovascular system in a state of low-level alert that was designed for short bursts, not sustained months and years. Cortisol in acute bursts is useful. It sharpens focus. It mobilizes energy. It helps you respond to challenges. But cortisol running continuously at elevated levels does something very different. It quietly raises blood pressure. It fragments sleep. It accelerates the very inflammatory processes that drive the chronic diseases we have been discussing throughout this entire video. Some studies place the long-term health impact of persistent loneliness on par with smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Read that again. Loneliness. On par with smoking. In terms of long-term mortality risk. And we are living through what researchers are calling a loneliness epidemic. In countries with some of the highest standards of living in human history, significant proportions of the population report having no one they can call in a genuine crisis. Young people, who are more digitally connected than any generation before them, report higher rates of loneliness than elderly populations. The connection we have replaced with screens and followers and likes is not the same thing as the connection the Harvard study was measuring. It is not even close. What protects you is not followers. It is not a contact list with hundreds of names. It is 2 or 3 people who actually know what is happening in your life. Who would notice if something was wrong? Who you can call without a reason. That is the variable that predicted health and longevity across 80 years of data more reliably than almost anything the researchers measured. So if that is thin for you right now, take it seriously. Not as a social observation. As a health priority. Invest in the relationships that are already there but have been drifting. Reach out to someone you have been meaning to reach out to. Be present in the relationships that matter instead of half present while your attention is divided across a screen. And now we arrive at the 2 habits I promised you at the beginning. The ones I consider the most important pieces of health advice that exist. The ones that, once understood, reframe everything else on this list. Stop outsourcing your health. That is the first of the two. And I want you to really hear what I mean by that. Because this is not about distrusting medicine. Medicine is extraordinary at what it was built to do. Emergency care. Infection. Trauma. Early cancer detection. Surgical intervention. These are genuine miracles of human knowledge, and I have enormous respect for them. But medicine was never designed to be your primary defense against chronic disease. It was designed to intervene after things have gone wrong. And somewhere along the way, a generation of people quietly handed over responsibility for their own health and assumed that the medical system would catch whatever they allowed to develop. That the scan would find it early enough. That there would be a medication to manage it. That the doctor would have an answer for whatever arrived. Imagine for a moment that you were given the car of your dreams. The exact one you have wanted since you were young. But there was one condition. That is the only car you will ever have. And there is no mechanic anywhere on earth who will ever touch it. No service. No repairs. Nothing. How differently would you treat that car? You would listen to every sound it made. You would never miss a service interval. You would put only the best fuel in it. You would drive it with extraordinary care because you would understand, with complete clarity, that its condition in 30 years depended entirely on the decisions you made today. That is your body. Except there is no spare. There is no replacement model. There is no trade-in. And yet most people treat their body with less care than they give their car. They wait for warning signs before changing anything. They manage symptoms without addressing causes. They take the medication that compensates for the damage without stopping the behavior that created the damage in the first place. The most powerful shift available to you is not a new drug or a new diagnostic tool. It is the decision to treat your daily habits as the primary medicine. To stop waiting for something to go wrong and start understanding that everything you do today is either building health or eroding it. Slowly. Cumulatively. Irreversibly. Health span is declining even as lifespan increases. We are living longer inside bodies that are struggling earlier. More years on medication. More years with reduced capacity. More years dependent on management rather than thriving. That trajectory is not fixed. But it will not change on its own. You have to change it. And the final habit, the one that pulls everything together, is simply this. Live as closely as you reasonably can to the way your great-grandparents lived, while keeping every genuine benefit that modern medicine offers. Think about what their days actually looked like. They ate seasonal whole food because that was all that existed. Nothing came in a resealable packet with a 14-ingredient list. They moved constantly because their lives demanded it. Walking. Carrying. Building. Tending. Their bodies were loaded and used throughout the day in ways that modern life has almost entirely eliminated. They lived in tight communities where social connection was not scheduled into a calendar but woven into the structure of daily existence. They slept when it was dark and woke when it was light because there was nothing powerful enough to override that biological rhythm. They did not have a word for these things. They did not call it a wellness routine or an anti-inflammatory lifestyle or a longevity protocol. They just called it Tuesday. And the diseases that are filling our hospitals today, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity, certain cancers, early cognitive decline, these are overwhelmingly diseases of the lifestyle we abandoned. Your great-grandparents did not die from these things at the rates we do. They died from infections that antibiotics now cure in a week. From injuries that modern surgery now repairs in an afternoon. From complications of childbirth that modern obstetric care has made rare. We solved their problems. But in solving them, we stopped living the way that prevented ours. The answer is not to go backwards. It is to take the wisdom of how they lived and combine it with the genuine brilliance of what modern medicine can do. Eat real food. Move your body every day. Do hard things. Protect your attention. Build and maintain genuine human connection. Take radical ownership of your health. And then, when modern medicine is actually needed, when a scan catches something early or a medication genuinely saves a life or surgery repairs something that cannot heal on its own, let it do what it does brilliantly. That combination. That synthesis of two eras. That is the strongest possible position a human being can stand in when it comes to their own health. The diseases that are shortening lives today are largely preventable. The research on this is not fringe. It is not controversial. It is the consensus of decades of epidemiological data across millions of people in dozens of countries. The habits that protect against them are not complicated or expensive or time-consuming. They are the habits that humans practiced by default until very recently. And they are available to every single person watching this right now. You do not need more medicine. You need these habits. Start today. Not perfectly. Not completely. Just start. One decision. One meal. One walk. One genuine conversation. One hard thing finished instead of avoided. One evening where the phone goes in another room and you are actually present in your own life. The drift toward disease is slow. So is the drift back toward health. But the direction you choose today determines which drift you are on. And that choice belongs entirely to you.